Hi, good evening. Today is January 5th, the second trading day of the year. And Victor's prediction for the up day today came true. The market was pretty much up since the open and closed at the top of the range. We had one nice pullback to get long, and we closed at the highs. We also talked a lot about inflation in the last couple of episodes, and today that talk has made it to the mainstream, and especially with oil being up 5% today, as well as all other various metals went up. For example, copper has closed almost at 8-year high. Well, Bitcoin, of course, is also up as an inflation hedge, was around 34,000. And of course, the main talk of the day is the Georgia election coming up. Everybody is talking about that. And about the Georgia election, on that news, there is lots of disruption that's going on around Washington, D.C., because there is a rally there. And it has gotten so bad that Apple Maps is actually now blocking the directions to Washington, D.C. So people who are using Apple Maps to get there, it's just not working. And the Apple's excuse is that there is lots of traffic. The road conditions are bad,
Who's
so they
rioting?
stop.
Who's rioting? The R's or the D's?
The Apple map is not showing the traffic, the directions.
But who's causing the trouble? Is the Republicans or the Democrats?
Oh, there is no trouble yet. There is National Guard has activated, and people are just trying to get in to Washington D.C. It's simply traffic jams, but they don't even want people to get there, apparently. But it probably will be very chaotic. So, especially with the results coming up late at night today. So we shall see.
What's your prediction?
Oh, I don't know. I think Republicans will squeak by. If I gun to my head, they will get at least one seat, the Republicans.
Well, what are the latest odds are about 50-50, depending
Right.
on. Oh, it's moved up to 51 for 51 versus 48 for the Republicans. And Purdue is ahead of Ossoff by 53 to 47. And Loeffler is she's way behind at 60 versus 40.
Right. So I think predictions at this point, the odds of that, it mostly reflects how people are betting rather than the actual odds, because at this point, I think it's too close for anybody to really know. But like I said, if I were to guess, the Republicans hold the control of Senate by one, at least one. But if they don't, then it will be really interesting.
Well, I once said that if the D's won and they were to raise the capital gains tax to 100%, the market would go up because the market loves a woke.
Yes.
And that's the big theme of the last year. They talk about special purpose vehicles and
Right.
the movement of the small investor in Robinhood and the options trading and the momentum trading. They talk about that being the main trend, but I say the main trend has been that the market favors woke But I don't know what would happen if the R's will never win another election again if they lose the Georgia runoff.
Well, I think the party would have to rebrand itself completely. As it is, there is a war within the party going on right now, where Ted Cruz and some other Republicans are more of a Trumpian bent, if you will, while the rest of the party is more Mitch McConnell and more traditional Republicans. And so there's a war within the party. And I think that Ted Cruz and that branch will eventually win, and Republican Party will be a lot different than it is right now.
But there will be new states added. There will be new increase in the Supreme Court.
I have to disagree with you there as well. I really don't think we would see any more Supreme Court justices, simply because the Democrats would have other priorities to pass, even if they have the majority. They have other priorities that they want to do besides Supreme Court. And given how Supreme Court was completely inadequate in changing the election in Trump's favor, it's not real. They're not really in a rush to change the Supreme Court. They they could just do whatever they want in Congress. They don't really need to change the Supreme Court. It takes a lot of political will, effort, and everything.
Well,
I don't.
you can disagree with me, and I yield to you because I have no insights that are valid about culture and politics. I I don't have better sources than anybody.
Right.
However, I have some thoughts about the market today.
Yes, let's do that.
Yes, and I think that's what our listeners are probably more interested in hearing from me. I
Definitely.
also have some thoughts about bighorn sheep and about discrimination in ice skating and discrimination in swing dancing and the incredible, well, let's start with the market today.
Okay.
It was so bad at the open in the half hour beforehand the market went down to in the 13,600s, 660s. And then in the first 10 minutes, it looked like it was going to new highs. It broke through the round number, got to 14 to 37.15, up 1.5% on the day. Everything was going through the roof. And then it stalled. It looked like when we've gone 4 days without a new high. Now remember, that's very, very bullish. And then at the close, we had a lot of weakness. We believe that all the big boys like to close out their positions at the close. They can make money every day. High frequency people do. So why should they take something overnight? And sure enough, the market dropped 1% from the high at the close. So it was sort of like I call it as like an interruptus day. There wasn't a proper climax to the market, and it's now at 3717. And the previous high is 3740, so it's 3749. It closed at so it's 1% from the all-time high and 4 days away from the all-time high. Now, I was thinking all day about that poor bastard who was the incumbent. He's had to dodge so many things. And last night was a typical thing. There was a big conference call between about 8 lawyers on the Republican side and several lawyers on the Democratic side, and all the Democrats, who were on the election committee in Georgia. And the only thing that was reported on the paper was that, on the media, was that the president said, I just give me 11,000 votes. That's all I care about.
Right.
But that wasn't a fair rendition at all of the conference call. What the president did is he stated about 8 different areas where he saw fraud. And some of them were quite compelling. And of those 8 areas, it probably came to about 500,000 votes that he felt that were taken away from him.
Right.
And what he said was that, look, forget about the 500,000. All I need is 11,000. If you don't believe me on the 500,000, just take 1 or 2, which is a very reasonable. Was very reasonable. Nothing that the president says gets reported in a fair way. He's had to deal with remember we spoke about the 6 or 7 things that forget about the fraud. There are about 6 or 7 things that happened that cost him the election.
Right. The vaccine, the Hunter Biden news, on and on.
The stimulus, the holdback in the stimulus.
Stimulus, of course.
And the holding fire. I still think that there's a lot of holding fire going on.
What do you mean by holding fire?
All the wokes are holding their fire.
Oh, right. Right. They stopped protesting, right, like 2 weeks before elections. All of the rioting stopped. Accidentally, I'm sure. But like you were saying, I mean, there are really no Republicans and Democrats. They all live in that swamp. They may squabble over some things, but at the end of the day, they're in it together and they don't want their cash flow disrupted by Trump.
I don't know if they have street games in Russia, but in Brighton Beach, in my day, street games were very common. All the kids played street games. And it was very competitive. There were gangs that would be on opposite sides. And the most common thing was for disputes about whether you were out or safe. whether the ball was fair or foul. And the disputes were settled by what they call your own man. If on your team, your own man said that you were out, that was considered definitive.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they had a fifth colonist who was pretended to be on your side, but was really hoping that the other side would win. And he might have been chosen last. They play a game called um, Johnny Johnny on your back, and which would decide the teams, and then you pick people. But what's going on with all these Georgia Republicans? They proudly announced that they voted for Trump, and they're very unhappy. Uh, they're very unhappy that he lost the election. I mean, there's your own man. These
Right.
people are trying their hardest to do him in. They have no inclination to follow up on any of the claims that he's made. They want to take. They leaked the tape.
Right.
There's no reason for them to do that. It's probably very, very unprofessional. They gave it to all the media, and then they had the headline, that he was asking for a ridiculous thing, that he wanted 11,000 votes, as if that was the only thing that he cared for. And he asked them to investigate all of the seven. Apparently, there's a notorious woman involved who was, they called her, who was constantly a vote harvester. And
Right.
according to the Republicans, she was the only one in the election office at 3 a.m.
Nice.
Now, there were so many things like that to say nothing about, and the idea that the courts, have 49 out of 50 cases have been thrown out. Well, yes, of course, the swamp will do whatever they can to to make sure that the president is changed. So I was thinking about. I once took swing dancing lessons from the world champion. His name was Yuval Had, and he was from Israel, and he'd have to compete in the world championships. And the judges were from the Mideast,
Hmm.
so he had to be 10 times better than anyone else to win, because
Right.
all these Saudi Arabians would do whatever they can. And then, of course, things like that happened to me, because they, on a small scale, when I played squash, I was like the only Jewish squash player who didn't go to prep school, and all the officials hated me. They hated when I won, and they would try their hardest to do me in. And it was, on a small scale, it was just like what happened to the president. So I was looking at the ice skating world, where there's many examples where they want the most beautiful woman to win the figure skating because it increases the ratings. There's a man named Johnny Ware who was a star on, he was an Olympic champion, and he was very successful on Dancing with the Stars, but he was gay.
Right.
And they wouldn't do any, there was several gay ice skaters, and they wouldn't do anything to, these men couldn't possibly win. And Johnny Ware's agent told him that he had no chance. And Tanya Harding was a great skating, but Nancy Kerrigan was very beautiful and was not heavy and masculine like Tanya Harding. And Tanya Harding couldn't possibly win either. So you have all this prejudice against them now. Crude is at $50. It's the highest it's been in 6 months.
Right.
So the dollar is at what, the euro is at 123. The yen is 102. It's at a high. You know, as the lower, the more yen you can get for the dollar, the worse it is for the dollar. Everything's at a high. We have so much inflation. Thank goodness for once the market was sensible. The bonds went down a full point today, but only a full point. They're still in a range that they've been in for the last 2 months. They're still between 172 and they got down to 172.03 today. They're only down a point. They're still above where they were 3 weeks ago when they were 170, 180. As indicated yesterday, the best indicator of what's happening is Bitcoin. It's a sponge that's sort of like half of inflation and half of woke. So the more that the D's come to the ascendancy and have everything in their favor, the better it is for Bitcoin, and because people want to have something that no one can take away from them. They want to have the ease of transactions, not having to worry about anyone interfering in it. And gold is threatening to go above 2,000. It's at a 2-month high. All the stock markets are close to all-time highs. The one thing I don't like is the German market is not as strong as the U.S. market, and I think that's very bad. I said we were going to have a little something from Bighorn sheep. Well, yes, here. bighorn sheep fight each other with their big horns. And
Wow.
it reminds me of what the techs are doing. The techs, of course, are all woke. We're all woke, and they're they're very happy to win the battles at the expense of of
Right.
small business dying,
Right.
and government having more control of what the capital is. And what do they do? What's the bargain? Well, if you arrange to kill the competition, then we will suppress all news that's non-woke. We will we'll make sure that we put Trump in the worst possible light, and we won't ever talk about Hunter Biden again. We'll make Sidney Powell look like a jerk, and that's the bargain that we see.
Right. And the Democrats used to be the party of the people, yet they completely do not even care that the big business has become, the big tech has become so monopolistic that they're completely killing the small businesses, even before the pandemic and obviously during the pandemic as well. And the Democrats,
they're able to prosper. They have an international business that's situated on the coast. They all support the Democrats and the woke. So they're very happy with what's happening. So everything's going to depend upon
the results tonight. It should be a volatile night for the futures, I imagine.
but I wouldn't be surprised, as you say, if Republicans maintain control of the Senate and the market opens
Well,
right up.
how about a Faustian bargain? If Mitch McConnell says that if we maintain control of the Senate, we promise not to investigate you. I mean, not to investigate the Trump's results. They could make a bargain, the Democrats and Republicans. I no longer believe that people actually vote. It's I think Stalin said it. It's not the votes that counts, it's who counts the votes. So we'll see.
Uh, it's going, the market was, as I said, it pretended to be going through the roof. It had a tremendous spate of momentum at the open.
Right.
Then it gave way. What's happening in the world of is Dr. Cattle making? Is he, is
No,
he
I didn't
best
hear.
to sink the Republicans?
Yeah, I didn't hear anything from Dr. Fauci lately. they're just closing up more and more countries. I think Canada is closing Quebec. Well, England is obviously closed, Britain, and they keep talking about this new virus spreading in the US. It's the same thing. They keep scaring people, and at the same time, looks like the vaccine side effects are already at least 50% higher than the flu vaccine, and adverse reaction is 50% higher. And the nurses in many hospitals refuse to take the vaccine. In LA County, for example, which is a progressive county, 30% of frontline workers refuse the vaccine. And so I'm not sure exactly how they're going to convince them to take it. Maybe after a while, people will see that there are no side effects to it. Meanwhile, in Florida, people are lining up to get the vaccine. Here, people are obviously older, 55 plus communities. So they actually do want to get the vaccine to feel safer and to be safer. And
I've been thinking about another trend. I came across, well, obviously, the people who got on the bandwagon this year have done the best. The ones who bought the fangs made over 100%. The ones who bought the special purpose vehicles started out with 100%. All the new issues gone up 100%. My daughter Victoria, our reader, is sitting on about 12 stocks. For their average appreciation is 500%. She's had Tesla for 4 or 5 years.
wow.
And the question is, are these stocks going to sink? Are they going to
Well,
crater?
I think the question should be not if they're going to sink, but when. It's
That's what I've been thinking about. So I studied a paper called "Does Trend Following Work?" by Wilcox. It's a 2005 paper. And then I sought out a man that I came in contact with 30 years ago.
Mhm.
His name is Alan Gillespie. And I've always thought of him as, well, recently I thought of him as one of the most sagacious people I've ever met. I put him in the line of the greatest traders I've ever met. Paul DeRosa, who was the director of research for Eastbridge, and partner of Eastbridge, and also head of the bond trading activities at Citibank. And then there was Ed Marks, who passed away about 10 years ago. He was so able. He was able to make 100% on many of his investments, including shorts. He shorted AT&T at 80 and it went down to 6 or so. And I put Alan, of course I knew Soros well, but he would always say, the question is, am I going to do above average next year? And he never thought that he could. And I think if you take his record over the last 15 years, you'll find that it was just average. as well as Buffett. But when I met Alan Gillespie, and maybe he'll be so kind as to let us interview him, I was shocked because he and his partner had a small office, and what did they do? They bought the stock that was up the most in a year. Now that seemed to me crazy at the time. But that strategy, as underlined in the paper by Wilcox, which I've referenced
Twitter.
on Twitter, it's one of the only, and also the studies of Dimson that it shows that trend following in stocks works. That buying the stocks that are up the most has above average performance. Now, I'm very good at, I can read a paper in about 30 seconds and find out whether it's scientifically valid or not. And the Wilcox paper was amazing because they took account of survivor bias, and
Right.
they took account of transactions costs, and they took account of the vig on selling, and I have to say, and Gillespie told me that he followed the same methods that he's been following 25 years ago to buy all the cryptos. So the idea that the stocks that are doing the best are going to crater is wrong. If anything, the statistics over 30 years show that that's a method that works. So.
Right, but what I was saying on Twitter, that method works if you buy all of the stocks that he has mentioned, and it's every year it varies from 700 to 2,000, and a typical retail trader cannot possibly come close to managing that number of stocks. So people pick and choose, and they pick and choose inevitably 7 to 10 stocks, and that's a totally different statistical game now. How would they know to pick the best stocks?
Well, Eugenia, if you can find a basket of stocks that performs 25 percentage points better than the market, and you pick it random from that basket, it's a much better basket than the S&P itself. So,
assuming you actually do sell them when they pull back, did you ever ask Victoria if she's ever planning to sell them at all?
I've been begging her to sell every day. I tell her that.
Right, but that's the thing. Those particular stocks are so popular, they're too concentrated. Like, for example, I posted on Twitter a video that was very the sentiment is so elevated on Twitter. There was very cute 18 years old, probably girl, who was saying, who was trying to help people to convert $600 stimulus check into 13,000. And she said, it's very simple. Just buy Tesla, Square, and Blink. Blink, it's one of those solar charging power stations or something. And she said, just buy those and your 600 stimulus will be 13,000. And, you know, one of those stocks, Blink, was up 10% today. So I'm just having a hard time believing that people who are buying Tesla right now or not selling Tesla right now will end up being profitable in half a year. It just has never worked like this before.
Well,
Every stock that has gone parabolic like that eventually pulls back.
my son Aubrey was named after the um, greatest fictional captain. He was an analog of Horatio Nelson, and Jack Aubrey, the hero of the Patrick O'Brien series, was the greatest knowledgeable captain on the sea that ever existed. And he was always saying, I want it, we have to get the weather gauge. We have to be with the stream, with the wind, and if you buy those stocks, you'll have the weather gauge. So I think that we're going to have to. I've been the number one detractor of trend following. I know it doesn't work in commodities. There are so many problems with it, but it appears to work in individual stocks. So don't denigrate the people that buy the stocks that are up the most. It's worth a scientific study. I don't know whether what they do at the beginning of a year. I wouldn't be surprised if the stocks that were up the most this year perform many percentage points better than the stocks, than the value stocks.
To the downside or to the upside? I mean, if you look at the most popular stocks in 2000, Yahoo, Amazon, Microsoft, even, they all were super popular and super trendy until 2000, which most of them lost what 70, 80% of the value, and it took many years to get back. Intel. So
when you have to take the good with the bad. If you bought every one of those high-flying internet stocks in 2000, I dare say that your performance would have been substantially better than the S&P index, because you would have had Google and you would have had Amazon.
which was down like 80% at some point, I think, Amazon.
Yeah, but what's the difference if it's up 3,000%? It's like the stock market.
Oh no, it's not. The difference is that most
It was
people.
down 80%. There was down in 2008. It was down 50% or so. But what does that mean? That you have to manage your money properly so that you can stay with it and that you don't get a margin call.
But
And
it's also psychology, right? Not many people could handle a stock that goes down 50, 70% and say, yeah, whatever, I'll just wait another 5 years or a year or two to see what happens. It's most people would just buy at their own time and sell at their own time. That's why the game is so difficult, right?
well, that brings up the subject of patience being the main virtue in the stock market. That you have to, and that was true in racket sports also. You have to always wait for your opportunity. And people who have a long-term mentality do a lot better than those with a short-term mentality. So, I've always been the number one detractor. I say that when they ask me for the best advice for day traders, my best advice is that you should never day trade. And you shouldn't have a short-term mentality when you're involved in stocks. And eventually, what's your prediction for the end of this year? Where do you think how much do you think stocks will be up or down?
Wow.
How about the normal 10%? During years when the market's been up and it was up 21% this year, the average performance for next year is.
Well, I mean, the probability that the market goes up is always higher than the probability of market going down.
Yes.
So.
Correct. And the probability that the stocks that are up the most will go up more than the average is above 50%. All right, well, we've covered a lot of different areas today. Thank you very much.
Are you trading tonight? Well, this
every night. Every night.
Wow. When do you sleep?
I have a screen right by my bedside, and I got up at I was waiting for the market to run above the round number of 2,700, but then it refused to go below 2,690, but around 7:20. Usually I get up at 5 a.m., but I was holding my fire. Around 7:20, it broke to the 70s and the 80s, and without taking the time to dress fully, I put out a line. But yeah, I think tonight should be a very exciting day. Of course, it went straight up last night, so it probably will bobble around until we get the Georgia elections, and I see now it's 54% versus 46% that the odds will win the Senate. So, hey, we've been 4 days without a new high. It's time for a new high in the next 2 days. Okay, Irina.
Sounds good. Have a good night. Bye-bye.